right, welcome to the December 20 Lighted Reservation Water Management Board meeting. So we'll call to order and start with an opening prayer, please. Georgia, would you please?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's great. Dear Lord, we just want to thank you for this day and this opportunity to assemble together. Lord, we want to pause for a moment and think of those in our community that are ill or tending to those that are. We want to think too about those who are working in emergency response and in the hospitals this time of year especially. We also ask that you give us wisdom as we approach this agenda today, that we can serve our community with both humility and sincerity today. And we ask your good wisdom in all these things. Amen.
Amen. Special thoughts and prayers for the family of Joe McDonald. We know others in the community are ill, but Joe's recent passing kind of hits a lot of people. So, yeah. All right. Thank you. Attendance, please.
Karen, please, Matt.
Here.
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 Georgia here. And Richard Henson.
Here.
And Jane Henderson and
All right. Thank you. So just to announce, as always, our meeting minutes are can be located on the DNRC and CSNKT websites. So if you're interested in seeing information from previous meetings, you can go to those sites. Any potential conflicts of interest on this agenda today, Georgia? Ken? Roger?
No.
Rich?
No.
Okay, nor for me, so we're good. For the agenda, any comments, questions, changes for today's agenda? Roger, did you have any? We're gonna try to
I think we just go over it.
just go over it. If no comments or questions or changes, take a motion to approve today's agenda.
I will approve today's agenda.
Motion by Ken, second by Georgia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, okay. Any public comment for items not on the agenda? So any of you who are here, who members of the audience, have any comments about things that aren't specifically on the agenda today, we want to go ahead and get you on the record. So in the audience here or online, is there anybody online you might want to comment?
Anyone who wants to comment, raise your hand. I'd like to speak.
Do we have anyone online?
No.
Thanks. Any public comment from our audience? Thank you. No public comment to have at this time. So we want to move to item number 3, starting with December 13 minutes. Please review those, and when you're ready, we'll take a motion to approve those. We're good with the December 13 minutes.
That's right.
You got what you need? You have?
They do.
Okay. Make a motion to approve 13 minutes when you're ready. Motion by Georgia,
Second by Rick.
second by Rich. All in favor, say aye. Aye. On to December 14 minutes, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the December 14 minutes as provided.
Motion by Roger, second by Ken. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Approved. Water engineer, 3.3, water engineer PTO accrual rate. So I think we just needed to chat about that, Ethan, I think, just to see where we're at.
But yes, sir, sure.
Yeah. Okay. You want to come up or whatever you want to do? I think, if I remember right, we had approved it pending receiving letters.
Yes,
Is
Mr.
that
Chairman,
correct?
board members, the request was to provide documentation of past work. And I did distribute some information. At our last meeting, there was a desire to have additional time to review those materials.
Okay, comments? Questions? Roger?
Okay, I guess I have to. So I scrutinized this pretty thoroughly, and I want to start by reading what the bylaw or the accrual rates say. It says employees must produce documentation of previous eligible employment to receive credit for years of service. Documentation must contain hours worked and be sourced from past payroll or personnel documents from the previous employer. So that kind of sets the stage. Ethan submitted us a packet of information and a little summary sheet. I guess I don't know if everybody has this in front of them.
I know I do not.
Okay.
We must have received it electronically, but I don't have it in front of me.
So, like I said, when I went through this, I don't think we're quite there yet. Number three, there were 3 items on his email to us. In lieu of the information from, I guess it was, part of it was the Forest Service, I think, because he provided a retirement package from JP Morgan. However, the retirement package was from, date of hire was August 22nd, 2005, and the statement was through October 1, 2005. So that was only 5 weeks of documentation. Provided a letter from Donna Redmond with the U.S. Department of Treasury, where I think this was a contract extension on the Forest Service. And on page 2 of the contract, it was for 230 hours of straight time. So on the summation, I think that would have been the biologist under USFSR. Or possibly the ecologist, but so it was to be the ecologist. So it 230 hours fell short of 2,080 hours. I guess I had a problem with the letter from the two letters, actually. One in particular from Bill Schultz. It's dated 2010. So this was only for 29 months of service. We know Ethan has worked at the DNRC, but he also worked under Mr. Nave and Arnie Wick. And so I think, you know, we should have had letters from both of those individuals to document that time in the two different DNRC positions. And then the letter from the Forest Service is dated May 13, 2005. It seems like this is more a letter of reference, but it does include the basically the 4 years of time. So I guess I just don't feel we have what's required as far as what's in the policy manual.
Okay, board members, I thank you for reviewing that, and I don't have a copy in front of me. Do you want copies of this material in front of you? You have it? You have it?
Not with me, but I haven't reviewed it.
Okay. Can I get a copy?
This is different.
Okay. So as we go through this, any other questions or comments?
I mean, I have the same concerns that.
Okay. Okay, okay, Georgia?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add, and I'm sure we're all thinking the same thing, because we are a nascent organization, and because we are being scrutinized, we do need policies. Appreciate the due diligence that is on this project. Yeah, maybe could you, even if you see the most recent report here is part of this big group.
So, Ethan, if you want to start by responding, I guess I have a couple comments
Sure.
as well.
Mr. Chairman, board members, Mr. Vice Chairman, basically what I gave you was what I thought was the most expeditious way to demonstrate years of service under these positions. The letter from scientists at the U.S. Forest Service for 4 years of service, I thought that seems pretty decent and concise way to demonstrate 4 years of service. The letters that I gave you for the contract that I worked under that same project leader, I gave you a JP Morgan document that showed the start date, and then the second document showed the termination date of the contract. The 230 was additional hours added onto the contract. So to me, that was a start with completion, and the letter from Bill Schultz was to show my hire date for DNRC. And I guess having a little more clear understanding of what you would like. The last discussion we had, we said you wanted to see some sort of letters. Those were letters. So I'm, you know, what the policy piece has got an interesting bar of events set up in there. Has never been tested really. So what kind of documents would you like to see?
Yes.
Number one, I don't recall asking for letters, I asked for documentation. Number two, I've done this myself, of course, it's a very simple matter to go to a government agency and ask for your record. Basically a phone call.
And I'm familiar generally, but not specifically with the Forest Service or DNRC personnel systems. But in my mind, I was wondering if you would be able to go directly to their personnel offices and just get the specific information verified from their personnel record, out of your personnel records that can document that. I don't think anybody's objecting to completing this, or what you're asking about. I think we took action pending the documentation. And if we could just get that documentation to clarify, as Roger put, to try to match what we asked for in the policy, that would be helpful. Anything else? Rich?
Yeah, just a quick question for clarification. We're asking for documentation of years of service for PTO accrual,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
And he provided letters. The one from the state would, to me, a letter is documentation. But what I'm hearing from the board is you want something from the state human resources offices that states exactly when service started and when service ended.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, thought something like that from a current official who can verify those records. They might reference these, but somebody who can verify those records today from today's, current official. Otherwise, we're looking at something from 2010, something from 2005, and that would have been my thought on it. Was something relevant that documents that information from the personnel record from current officials. And you'll be using this at some point. So if we need to clarify after this, if we need to clarify the policy to make it clear how what we're looking for other hires as well, we should do that, but that would be helpful in this case. So, sure. Okay. Anything else, Georgia?
One more
Yes.
question, Ethan. On your federal service, the easiest way I found to get documentation is the National Archives. I actually wrote him a snail mail letter and got it back pretty quickly.
Do they, like the Forest Service, do they not have a personnel office that someone can go to and get your records, or? I don't know.
It's in Albuquerque. They have centralized services.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how their Forest Service works, but that's, yeah. And DNRC must have, I think you've got DNRC's got a personnel office.
Yeah, they have, I think probably Kathy or Anna would be a better person to ask. So how, they have a standard human resources office in Helena, don't they?
Correct.
Happy to do it.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, if there's nothing more on that, move on. Yep, thank you. Board compensation submissions, the 1220. Discuss handout, and James, is that the item we were working on?
Yeah.
Okay. And so there were a few corrections made, so please double check yours and make sure they're now correct. And thank you for correcting mine. I noticed that date changed, so thank you. So I'm good. Roger?
I'm okay.
I almost said Gary. I saw Pitt and I'm thinking Gary Pitts. Ken? Georgia?
No, mine will need to be corrected. I wasn't here on the 14th. I couldn't attend even remotely. So don't pay me for that.
So we'll, for the record, Thursday, December 14th should be 0, correct?
Correct.
Okay, for Georgia. Okay, can we just get that on the record and then when we take action, we'll make sure that's included, all right? Anything else, Georgia?
Mine was fine.
Rich, okay. With that, take a motion to approve these.
I'll make a motion to approve the board compensation as modified.
As modified by Georgia, motion by Roger,
Second by Rich.
second by Rich, all in favor, say aye. Aye, all right. Thank you, Ethan, James. And so duly noted that I absolutely skipped public comment, but let's get on the record. Is there any public comment on it? Okay, do we have any public online? So there's no public available to comment and no online and no comment from the public here in the audience. So thank you for reminding me that. Get ahead of myself. Other board business and board committees. Anything from any board members? Was there anything that you needed from us, Ethan? On the other?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, there is one small item. It's a minor, I don't think it needs an adjustment of the agenda or anything. But at some point today, just want to follow up. You had requested to have some notebooks
Yeah,
provided for, and then right now, just real quick, if the board wouldn't mind, I can tell you what's in here and maybe do a quick brainstorm of what you might want to add.
why don't we just hand them out and let's just take a quick look.
That sounds good.
Yep.
I don't know how you want to do your color selection, but I'm gonna walk them over here in front of you.
Grab and go. How's that? All right.
Thomas, the tank engine.
So thank you for putting,
My son loves him.
Haley, you can go through this.
If you not, I really love it.
There's a NFCL documents, it's not for this is case order reference, that would be Shane's. He got black, which is funny because usually everybody else. But anyway. So if James helped me with this, we've got the compact, we've got the ordinance, we have the bylaws, which would be your most recently updated bylaws. We have both funding agreements. We expect that there to probably be a certain select number of compact appendices. We haven't gotten around to adding that just yet, but we thought this would be a good time to find out what else ought to be on the list, so we'll be happy to add it to you.
so when you say compact, is that the full compact? That's just the,
That's not quite the thousands.
yeah, that's not, this is just the,
40 pages.
cool.
85, 2019, 01. Yep, I think that.
The only other things, let's see, and we've got. So just my thoughts, an org chart, budget. board timeline and any flow charts. Those would be my additional thoughts. Yeah, Roger.
And resolutions that we've passed. And any other
Do you
actions
want,
like that.
let me ask you this, do you want, resolutions in this binder, or do you want to create a single binder of resolutions for the office? I think we've got several, and as we go, that'll just add to the, just a thought.
Well, I like them in here as central location. There's only 4 right now, so.
Okay, well, if we need to change that, we can. So yeah, written resolutions. And what else did you say?
Seemed like we had some other
Maybe eventually the personnel policies.
administrative eventually, but any other administrative.
Well, I think we're talking personnel, probably personnel policy, and then you're operating.
The WPMP when.
Yeah, yeah,
A version gets done.
yeah.
Obviously, these living documents would need replacement from time to time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I heard resolutions, an org chart, board timeline. I suggested a few appendices of some key water rights, from the compact that might be useful. You know,
Any flow charts? I don't know if we're done with flow charts, but I know we're,
appeals, information. Would you like to see the appeals and hearings procedures? When those get, finalized after the public comment period?
My sense is that on the appeals, their own binder.
Budget, awesome.
yeah, in the budget.
Budget, okay?
Otherwise,
Forms, you want copies of forms in this binder?
I would keep them separate too. You'll keep those. Otherwise, this is good.
All right.
Much appreciated. And then board members, you're,
Throw appreciation, James. I did a little shopping. James did the lion's share of the load so far, so,
thank you, James. And so board members, you can, I thought if we did this, something you could take with you or leave here, either way. And I think for me, for the time being, I'm gonna leave mine here, especially till we add a little bit more to it.
Yep.
So,
yeah, if board members could just leave them at your spots, if that'll work.
Yep.
We can do that, and then we'll put your names on there. Is that, you got your color sorted out? Yeah, is that where we're at?
that'll work. Close enough.
Okay. The stickers, we'll try for the ones. that you
Close
can
enough.
pull off, change your mind.
Well, my thought was, if I may, this is an excellent tool when you're onboarding a new board member in the future.
Yeah,
So this is a great way to capture what I'm doing as we go, so the next person coming on. So I'm not gonna put my name on mine. I'll stay here binder a few years from now. You can just reuse this for the next board member, but this is a great way to train the next person coming on. Well, if they want to.
that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else, Georgia? Ken? Roger? Rich? All right. Any other board business, committee business? Okay, number 4. Legal counsel and water engineer, consideration of complaint form and process.
Just gonna sit down here. I can't turn it.
Yeah.
What's on right now?
We're on to the form, correct? So Ethan, before we go on to that, did we need to do something with this?
There was a request for the per diem, rate, table at the last discussion, so that's.
It's just
It's just
information? Okay.
You know, put that in your binder.
Okay,
If you would like us to. James did modify a little bit to make it more board specific. Of course, that's during September. September of 2023, right? With that. Yeah, with the state, I mean, it just tracks the states.
okay,
For the.
Thank you.
Helps explain how it works, what the rates are, that kind of information.
thank you. All right, on to the form, so take it away.
Oh, I think Haley's taking this one away. It's,
You guys get to arm wrestle, because it says legal and water engineer.
second.
All right. Haley,
I-
welcome.
I can do introduction here, and then as we kind of go through the process document, we can, collaborate on that. Have some discussion with some of those sections that Ethan and I, drafted. But, this conversation, started from our meeting last week on Thursday. We proposed a water use complaint form, which is in front of you, 609F. Again, very minor changes were made to this from the one, about 5 months ago that was before the board. And this is in response to members of the public, who would like to see this, and need this available to them. So that's the form. If you have not had a chance to look at that, or if you have any comments on the form in general, we can discuss that too. But the board action last week was to table the form until we had some processes before the board, so that the office is not hanging out to dry when this form goes public.
Yeah, your recommendation was to complete the process. One thing occurred to me last time, I just probably slipped my mind, is for the process and for this form is how do we appropriately address the kind of complaints, for example, that we received verbally last time during the comment process, when in reality it's would be more of a referral, us hearing that, but then referring them to appropriate other offices, because there may be a water rights element to that, but for the most part, that particular issue didn't deal with water uses, water permits, and water rights. Dealt with things that are more environmental and could be dealt with or may be dealt with by other offices, including some of the tribal offices or state or county offices. So I just wanted to, somebody might grab this and file this complaint, and say, well, I filed this complaint, and it's really not appropriate. So I'm assuming we have built into this, if not directly, at least by inference, the ability to take whatever we receive, and if it needs to be just referred out, then we just either verbally or in writing tell them, refer them to a possible appropriate other agency.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, board members, that's an excellent idea. It does dovetail to a separate effort that it would occur, that we've already started some time back, which is to come up with a little brochure like folks have for off the reservation that talks about what kind of permit you might need for a project, and then who the jurisdiction is for that. I think that's, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Mr. Chairman, but certainly working with Rich's office, we have identified that would be a benefit to have something like that, so that when somebody needed an ALCO permit, they would be able to see right on there what kind of activity they were trying to do. They would see, who they go to. If they needed a water right permit, they would see right on there, would send you to our office. If they had a problem with their irrigation project, water delivery, we have the Flat Indian Irrigation Project office in St. Ignatius right on there. And I think that is what you're kind of getting at a little bit, Mr. Chairman. Is that sound right?
That's an approach. I just want to make sure that we thought about it and that we're not going to get ourselves in a bind by taking a comment like that from that individual and then not having an appropriate way to address it when it's not really for us. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I think a recent experience that we just heard testimony about, or public comment about, demonstrates that there's an issue where somebody maybe got permission from somebody to do something that they didn't really have before permission. To open their eyes and there's some confusion as to how that happened. I'm not totally sure that does seem to have occurred. So not a hypothetical necessarily.
Any other thoughts on that? Any other questions, comments on the form before we move on to the process? Okay, as they come up, let's just make sure we speak up, bring them up. So you want to move on to the process?
Sounds great.
Okay. At whatever point you need to hit.
Ethan, do you want to start with your first comment, kind of since it's that first subsection then?
Yeah, I'm having some computer issues. Apologies here. Oh, there we go. All right, thank you. And my window got stuck. Oh, and they're right up there. Thanks, James. So what we have here is so Haley did the lion's share of the drafting for this and did so. We were trying to make it so that this would be able to be something you could just copy and paste right into the WPMP. Whether or not that structure and format shifts a little bit, we'll sort that out. But for now, it just matches going. Then there is also a specific section of the ordinance that deals, the largest section that talks about complaints to the engineer regarding actions or clear action between the co-creators. And to me, I really wanted to highlight that the complaint process may be, this is an important section of the ordinance, certainly, but the complaint process in our office may be a little more broad in that we may, at times, this particular structured bit of work from Haley is good for when we have two parties that need to work this out because they have ongoing water management issues. There may be other scenarios where a complaint is filed about just a straight up illegal use of water or waste of water that may not really benefit as strongly from in-house hearing between two parties, but rather maybe benefit from a separate type of action that's less of a hearings arrangement between two parties and then an enforcement action from this office. Maybe there's not as much need for this hearing. I hope I did it already. Got a thing that. And so what you have in front of you doesn't quite have that element, but we're thinking about it. And if you had thoughts about that, we would try to take that direction and incorporate it into these procedures.
not to get off track, one of the, for example, we had the, phone call about the possible well being drilled near our league associated with the, gravel pit, I think, that development. How would that have, does this process address that? And how would that have worked? And where are we with that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, board members, that's an excellent example of something that would need to be done in additional to this process, where somebody was reporting a well going in that they were unaware that the folks drilling the well had achieved pre-approval from this office in advance. Now, in that particular situation, it was a circumstance where pre-authorization from our office wasn't necessary, but that would be something that the board might want to consider, having a way for people to file a complaint or what they think of as an illegal action or development of water or use of water. And again, filing a complaint doesn't necessarily mean that it's legitimized, but it does give people a more structured way to document what they're trying to report to us off.
If that wasn't included in this, what would that be included in?
The share with board members, I think we're just sort of trying to think on our feet here and get all this stuff together right now. So that's, I think that this is probably need to maybe, if the board would like us to include that type of additional development of this complaint procedure section, we should probably get some marching orders from you to do so.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah, just a clarification real fast too, so that we don't go too far down the rabbit hole here. So the complaint process that's in the ordinance is very specific to a type of complaint brought before the office. It's a wasting of water. Wasting is defined in the ordinance, and so if you look at that definition 100 times, one of the pieces of it at the very end is an application of water to anything but the beneficial use as well. Now, could that include legal use? Who knows in that sense, but again, the complaint process is between appropriators. When it's an informal complaint, as we're talking about with a potential well being put in the gravel pit, or my neighbor is leaving their head gates open all year round, all the time, 24/7, whatever, like any of those things can be brought before the office of the engineer at any time as an informal complaint. It does not need a formalized complaint form. That just needs to be noticed to the office of the engineer. Now, if we choose to have some sort of process for that, then we can. That's not mandated by the ordinance. What is mandated by the ordinance when we receive an informal complaint like that, though, is that the office of the engineer, and I guess I should rephrase, it's not mandated, but the engineer does have additional enforcement powers to then investigate that illegal use. So there is that avenue already in the ordinance. It would just be whether we want to, have it where they just have come in, they want to make the informal complaint, maybe they jot it down on a note and we document it that way, but it does not need to be through this form.
Okay. Well, it's the reason for asking. So if you want or need the board to help address that, let us know. What I'm hearing is that it could end up being just an administrative or ministerial process that the office of engineer handles when that comes in. If you need more from us on that, let us know. But that one stood out because that came in, and I know I took the call on that originally. So
sure, and to try to do a better job, what I was trying to get across is that if this board wants to see those items documented, there's a couple of ways you can approach it. You know, one is I can receive information and document it from my end. The other way is that we can have an additional filing process built into this. And so they are a little different. One is certainly requires people to engage in filling out a form and filing it, which, as we know, when folks file things with our office, they are public records. And so it does make a difference on what a person might come into our office with. I really do think this is could go either way, which is why your leadership on it would be helpful. And maybe you don't have that fully thought through today, but I try to bring it forward as something that we need to get a little bit of organization so I can help to meet expectations on what level of documentation this board would like to see on activities like that.
Yeah, on the informal side, it seems to me like we keep it simple on one hand, but I think documentation is also important of some kind. Whether you write it down or they do, it just needs to be some kind of record of it. That way we can keep track. But okay. Any other comments at this point?
I was just curious, in that scenario, would we or would we not have a fee? My assumption is there wouldn't be, but would we for an informal complaint? Because you would still have to respond to that, right? It would still be time and effort on the part of the office. So even if you don't have a water right, but you have a suspicion that somebody is wasting water, it would require follow-up. And I'm just talking out loud, kind of verbally processing here, but I know in other jobs I've had here on the reservation, some of the best information I ever got to do my job came from the general public.
Yeah.
So you want to have that, but it does require you to still go out and follow up on it. But do you have a filing fee or something like that?
And I think that is an excellent question, and one that I was sort of,
That's what you're getting
we
at.
got to figure that part of it out, and we also have to figure out how much documenting it needs to occur for these things, and there could be, I mean, I think we have some real structural requirements that are fundamentally important that you've been provided here. Because there's that section in the ordinance, but some of these, perhaps, I don't know if you want to call them less formal or what, but certainly when I start making phone calls to figure out if there's something going on, I'd like to, we could put that in the process, and I'm just gonna do that. And that's the end of it. That does actually give me a process. So, if that makes sense, whereas right now, the situation you're talking about, kind of working off of, new territory, what kind of document is needed. There's a lot of different kind of documentation that can happen with thing, and I just would be my best meet what this board would like to see. And certainly when I started taking people's contact information and putting it into a document about what I got information, that is a factor. Being saying is a factor. Those are elements you're trying to
Need to work out. So
That was me taking us down a rabbit hole.
yeah, no, I know, but I think given that with the clarification that we're talking about the ordinance driven formal process that deals with wasting of water, issues between water users. That's what this is. And the informal side. So if we can focus on this and then maybe suggest that you and Haley work out a recommendation for how you want to handle the informal piece. If you need board action on that to help firm that up, we'd be glad to help with that. Otherwise, I'm thinking informally, you probably want your office just to figure out how to best handle it. But I do think some kind of documentation is important. So anyway, So, do we want to go down this? I mean, we started down this and I don't know where we left off on this process, but, do we need to start over or do you want us to hit some highlighted pieces here? What do we need? I don't remember where we left off.
Yeah, I mean, we started at just sub one, so I think Ethan, if you do have any specific areas that, you know, you want answers for your office and how it functions, and I think that's the best place to go.
I see some highlighted piece here, like number 4.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
So, last Thursday, when you left, we stopped in the process there because we didn't feel comfortable looking at those sections without a full board.
okay.
And I don't know if you want to go back to that or start somewhere else today.
I'm just throwing out questions, so go ahead.
Yeah, Ken's right. We did no longer have a quorum, and so we stopped at that big yellow section, but I guess that was the policy and procedure stuff, but maybe we should sort of look at what we got in front of us first and then go to that. And I guess on number 4, like you mentioned, it's kind of highlighted in yellow. And I had one thing on that. It says within 3 days, but I was thinking, how do we notify them? Should we send it out certified mail, or is there a process we should be using so that it acknowledges that the person that's receiving the complaint received it? And maybe some language to that extent.
And it's 3 days. Set in stone, is that written somewhere?
To clarify, the stuff in yellow is all ordinance language.
Okay.
So we made sure to highlight that so that there's clarification on it. Those are actual, that's pulled directly.
So that's what we have to.
It is, yes.
And I try to do that so that you wouldn't get caught trying to rewrite anything that was fixed. Because I had that problem myself, when I was first looking at it, I was like, oh, it's 3 days, it's ridiculous. And then I was like, oh, 3 days is actually what we're doing.
So what is?
And so sorry to not bring up the highlighting on the introduction, but
No, that's okay, Georgia.
I'm just trying to jar my own memory. Didn't we have a prior discussion too on how we define 3 days? And there is language in the ordinance dealing with holidays and weekends, correct? So that 3 days has some give, but not a lot.
Depending on when it's filed, yes.
Okay.
If it's filed on Thursday, then you get until what? Tuesday, nope, Wednesday.
No matter when it's filed on Thursday.
If the deadline falls on a Friday or a weekend or a holiday, then it goes forward to the next
Working
week in the business day. So, so if it got filed on a Thursday, you get a little bit, but not as much as sorry. It's a little exercise in math.
It is defined though.
It's defined, but it just, the thing that struck me when I read that is it underscores the need to staff up the office before we roll out, or as soon as we can in rolling this out. It's a lot, it's gonna be a lift, so. Okay,
So continuing to interpret the language, shall serve a copy of means they have to have it in their hand by then.
See, and that's where we can play around with this wiggle room, right? This is what the ordinance specifically says.
Right.
But then we can play around with the, you know, what does serve actually mean? And service in rules of procedure is defined. And so typically, you know, there's a couple different things. It's either to the person, personally, could be to their residence, with somebody who's part of that, has a relationship with that person. It could be on their place of business. more representative of their business. So there's a couple different avenues with that, but I think we need to think about, again, to how process works here. You know, in this location.
I do have recommendations, but mine are largely based on a certain level of convenience and understanding of our staffing level. Which for me, if we can go with shall serve a copy of the complaint, first of all, it's just a copy of the complaint, so there's not I recognize right off that we don't have to come up with some review of the complaint. This is just like, hey,
You got the form,
complaint came in,
send it to them.
photocopy that, stamp, stamp it, date stamp it in our office, receive, make a copy of it. And then what I would, I'll start on the easier side, which is like, we will mail it using the regular post office like we do all of our other important documents. Within 3 days of receiving the complaint, and use the days the way that they're defined. You can just make the clarification as to we're going to mail it.
So postmark equals served.
And I'm reaching here. I
I mean, I would not change the language that's in here. I think it would be more of an addition to, right?
No.
So it would be a clarifying sentence after this. I would not change the text of the ordinance.
I'm not even talking about changing the language here. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, if we say internally, or maybe add a footnote to this, say, so that's just the question. Are we saying it's possible that as long as it's postmarked within 3 days, or do they have to have it in hand in 3 days? If this is ordinance language, we better understand it, yeah.
I would leave it undefined. Like gives the engineer flexible to either send certified regular mail or walk it over.
I have a different question. So when I'm reading this language, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what's the definition of success for this? Is the definition of success that you have sent out a copy of the complaint? Or is it that the person you're complaining to is aware of the complaint made against them? Because this does not connote receipt of the complaint. Right, so they may not be home for 2 weeks, it could sit in the mailbox, right, that's on them.
Right.
But what is success, that they're aware of the complaint, or that we just get the complaint out the door?
It's whatever the office can control, which is the
Get the
service.
complaint out the door, okay,
We can't control if they're aware of something or not.
okay, so
Success would be the component.
we always default to that, sure.
I mean, that's why really, a little more complicated being served. For court or something is. But that would be a level of commitment that would be hard for us to.
Well, I'm just sitting here imagining a bunch of different scenarios that could initiate a complaint, and if it's wasting water and it's a significant waste, you'd want that resolved quickly, right? So that's where the genesis of my question is coming from. It's one thing to let them know there's a complaint, it's another to actually solve it. And I'm sure that that's elsewhere, but thank you, that answers my question.
And you could start with assuming that if something's gonna go wrong, the first thing would be that their address isn't correct on file. So that's the tough spot, is that just tracking, just having to touch a few things like this, trying to track somebody down is sometimes harder than you would think. If they have not taken the time to update their address, or they've got a couple of different residents and they don't check the mailbox at that house very often, then all of a sudden, communicating with you.
But if we have records that we've attempted to get it to them, to do the best we can with the best information we have, I'm assuming that that's documentation, that's documented, that at least down the road, when someone says you never notified us timely, we can show that we did everything we could. I'm assuming that that's the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, you think, so an example in a different setting is when, you know, a plaintiff will file a complaint in district court, just a general complaint. The court receives it, they stamp it, and then they just send it to the address that was provided to them. That's service for the court. They, you know, will not do anything further than that. They won't go hire a process server. That's not their responsibility. Service is just to send out a certified copy. There's also just another layer of reassurance too here in the compact about posting the notice on the website too. So there's 2 levels of notice at this point.
I guess I kind of like the idea of sending it certified mail, because then that way, you know, if they actually got it. And if they didn't get it, then it comes back to the office, and then they know, you know, that it never.
Or if they refused it.
Or they,
I've had that quite often. People trying to issue a violation notice to just won't pick up their mail. They refuse it.
yeah,
In fact, we had one woman that we finally issued a notice on Valentine's Day. We put it in a pink envelope.
There's a pro tip right there. Okay, so I wrote that down.
Did it work?
I didn't, it did. We had a special agent across the street watching
better get some pink envelopes.
it.
The holidays are done.
Do you want to give direction from the board to do that, or just make that the suggestion and let the office figure out what's best? I'm not.
Well, I guess I thought it that way. I guess I didn't realize you could refuse it. I just thought you had to sign for it, so.
Yeah, you don't have to pick up something certified. Most people do, but I think something certified. You don't have to, just goes back.
We do receive certified mail, and it is the same situation even for our office. You don't sign for it, it just sits there.
Goes back, yeah. So, next paragraph.
Well, the yellow is right out of the compact, and we said yes, we say yes again, she said it's very poorly written paragraph.
Yeah, and the yellow, right, and the yellow colors are a little, they're unintentionally different hues, but, you know, you get the point.
And so that paragraph then bleeds into the next page, which is the notice, and then number 5, extension of time, and then the next deadline is under resolution of complaint.
Yeah, we are required at the, to inform the parties in this sort of scenario, this type of complaint, that there may be a more timely and cost-effective remedy than having the complaint adjudicated by the office of the engineer. That's actually a requirement of the ordinance. And so, that's included in this notice. So we can just go ahead and get back on this.
And can I just make a quick suggestion on this form? So when I was putting this in here, I just inadvertently shifted the 2 paragraphs. I would like the a complaint was filed with the office to be the first paragraph on the forms, and then so to go about the parties take note. In terms of establishing the timelines and everything, there was a complaint filed and so.
And we'll go ahead and doctor up then, James, if you would, where it says, may provide, you say a more timely. something to that effect, you can change it a couple of ways, but. It does not like more than I think I will.
The compact has more timely.
Okay. The compact does have the way I just changed it back. Yeah, but we're gonna-
The paragraph above, so you go into the next deadline is 15 days. Time of complaint hearing. But that end of that paragraph says notice may also specify if engineer or designee requires additional time. Does that additional time cut into that 15 days or extend that 15 days?
Extends it. Is the understanding, at least from reading the ordinance.
And it says the parties may extend the time. There's no sideboards on how much time they can extend, just says they can extend.
It's sub 5, if you can go down a little bit. This right here is that sub 5, that's not out of the come. Or that's right out of the.
That's in the
ordinance also.
ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in parties, is the engineer or the designee now considered one of the parties?
That'd be the
What was that?
that'd be the water users.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be the complainants or the petitioners in that sense, that this particular section of the ordinance covers 102 through 107, which includes complaint process and petitioner processes. But that's when we get to like water commissioners down the line.
Sure.
In subpart 2, when it says the complainant, on the complaint no later than 15 days after providing notice of the complaint to the respondent. Does that mean a hearing could be held without the complainant being present? Let's say they never got the letter, they didn't respond, you still hold the hearing, is that right?
No, so it would just mean that the hearing would be set, like a hearing would be set with providing notice. But that would be up to the office of the engineer at that point, when we get to the actual hearing date, they do not show. Then he could take testimony from the party that does show.
Gotcha, okay.
So the 15 days could be extended by 10 days. Be 15 plus 10. If the engineer needs the time.
Yeah, I mean, and it's specific to doing an independent investigation too, so. you know, what independent investigation means. That has some flexibility to it too. Whether that means a designee or the engineer himself goes out to that location to assess it.
Let me make an editorial comment. Instead of saying page one, page two, I really want to see one of one, one of two, one of three. I like that.
On step two, I of course get concerned about needing to do a field investigation during the winter.
Can I go back?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I just had a question.
Sure.
It says if any resolution documents are generated, executed, parties may submit a copy to the. Why is it may instead of shall?
Where you at?
Sub one.
Ethan, I think if you wanna explain that, so I had it initially as a mandate, but if you wanna explain the may for the office's purpose.
Yeah, so the may is in there because if the parties want to, so I can remember this correctly. Is if the parties want to come to some sort of a resolution, they don't want to share it with the public, but it resolves it, and they don't want to share it with us because it can lead to be public. This would give them the option to not submit it.
So the person receives a complaint, the two parties get together, they resolve it, and then.
In their resolution documents. Yeah, so say, you and I, have an argument about shared headgate. And I'm like, all right, I'll give you $150 if you let me take my water first. Yeah, but, you know, I don't want you to tell everybody I'm giving you, I'm taking $150 to do that. And then you're like, okay, well, then that would be a document or a contract. You know, that maybe you want to share with our office.
So the parties settled, though, do we document that it was settled?
Yes.
Or does the person complaining withdraw the complaint?
Right, so that was my initial reason for putting shall submit any resolution documents, because it would be a trigger for the office that the matter is closed. And then could formalize that in the record, that parties resolved it informally outside of the office. And this matter is deemed closed, or however they want to write a closing order. We could do it other ways where they could just, inform the office that happened. The only problem I have, or I foresee with that, is somebody could just say that.
Yeah, no documentation.
And you know, that I think could present a lot of problems, especially with how adversarial it could get.
I was concerned that one of the parties sold the place. We had this handshake deal or contract. If that would cause more problems later on.
Just, you mean settling or lack of documentation?
Both.
He died.
Yeah.
And that's all.
But if the parties can settle, you don't want them to settle?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just wondering whether having a document like it's consent decree or settlement agreement or something like that out there. And they could even file it with the county maybe or something like that. Maybe they wouldn't file it with the county. And then they sell the property. And then that person says, whoa, what's going on here? And then they bring it to the engineer. Is that a valid concern or am I just getting too nervous?
I think it's a valid concern, but I also think that it's, pretty tough to like set up a complaint resolution that would be pertinent to the land, you know, I mean, maybe. I mean, which is, I think, what you're getting at, right? So that you file with the county, the way you would a shared well agreement or something that has a resolution in it, and,
Well, it's gonna be documented. In either case, that would be public, so if it's gonna be documented, you might as well do it through this process. We've got the record, because it's a complaint that was generated here.
Okay, well,
I'm just,
I'm comfortable with me, I just want to know why I did it.
well, it's to try to encourage people to go sort their stuff out, in this office. I guess, that's no, anyway, yeah, and I might be exaggerated, and that was what my thinking was, you know, of course, you think it's a bad idea, no, this would be the spot on time to get that may turn to a shall. Because it started off as a shall, I changed it to a may, you're wondering why it's not a shall, it came up even without us talking about it yet. So, you know,
I was just asking what's the rationale was. And that was my question.
well, it's sort of covered by the highlighted language on page 1 on the number 4 already. That bottom yellow. We're already saying it.
for what it's worth, if we had a situation where the parties decided they were gonna work it out, and they had previously filed a complaint form with our office, I would still write a letter. Regardless, it says, our office is under the understanding that you've resolved the complaint that you filed on such and such date, and that unless you contact us, we're not gonna do any additional nuclear action on this. And so, I mean, there's not any way that we would have some sort of a closure, for something like that. We even do that for much smaller items about property or application transfers or whatever we can to just try to document or our general understanding of things. How that is, we still give a read on it, but we typically say that would be if you thought it made sense that when the office issued a letter, a no action letter like that we needed to formalize that with the.
I'm good with it. Answer my question. I have a question number 3. When you have an attorney representing all the non-private parties, this has to be licensed in Montana. You didn't do that for attorney for a individual. Well, that means that attorneys from anywhere in 50 states are here.
Where are you looking?
3.
You're talking about the first line,
Yeah.
just adding that in though, the qualifier.
Well, I'm just asking, is that what you want? I mean, you want someone from Wyoming representing the client?
No, I mean, this would be consistent with what we put in the appeals process too. Where it would be an attorney in good standing in Montana or CSKT, so I think we should add that qualifier then.
Generally, this is mostly to let people know that if they have a corporation or limited liability company, they have to have, counsel. Right, I see your point. They also, we didn't try to, that's what the, in case that is, overlooked, that is exactly what 3 is supposed to do, which is consistent with the water. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do, the Montana or CSKT tribal court, is there any reason to include federal? Or that's just assumed?
I'm good with the Supreme Court and the state district court, and they mean nothing. Just like it's on the flat on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should keep it to Montana and CSKT.
Okay.
You have to first be a member of one of those bars anyway to
be a
seek your
fair-
federal licensure, so.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so I think we should just keep those.
It looks good on the wall.
I wouldn't know.
In 5 subpart A, this is just a old teacher comment, but there may be a legal reason to have it worded this way. Where it says shall explain their positions concerning the matter complained of, could it just be concerning the complaint? That's okay. On 5 subpart A, the end of that sentence reads, shall explain their positions concerning the matter complained of, and I'm cringing at a dangling preposition. Can we just say concerning the complaint? Or is there a reason to remove it that I don't?
Unless it's out of the ordinance.
I think it might actually be. Give me one second.
It should be, I recommend making. Concerning the matters of the company, right?
Yeah, and, you know, I think that's a synonym of what is in here, so I think changing it to make it read better is not going to change the actual effect of the language.
Well, the answer is yes, you can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Concerning the complaint.
Substance of the complaint. Just asking. Georgia. You just like complaint, okay.
It's like it's simple.
But I would like to back up to 4.
Yep.
I'm surprised, Roger, you haven't said any of that 4. This right out of the compact, that language.
Besides the, I think even you added that second line. Right?
Okay, never mind then.
Independent investigation, what does that mean?
It's what the engineer designee deem fit, deem appropriate.
Say that again?
It is what the engineer or designee deem appropriate.
Independent investigation.
Yeah.
So he can just hire anybody or?
So, no, it would mean that the engineer or the designee themselves or staff
Okay,
of the office, for example, could go out to the location, where the, you know, this inaction or action is taking place and look at what's going on the ground. That might be one scenario. Another scenario might be, contacting an expert, in that area to get background information on what's being complained of.
right.
Yeah. But it leaves room for the engineer designee to go, you know, a little bit further if the complaint doesn't necessarily explain it to the fullest extent.
Well,
was your concern in that?
You know,
Well, you know, we
Yeah,
been saying all along that we rely on the applicant and the complainant.
oh, as opposed to the engineer, yeah.
And this is putting the engineer kind of into, for lack of a better word, the water cup.
Yeah.
But if it's out of the contract, that's
Out of
that's
the
a long
contract,
story.
right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the extension that's right above in sub 2.
Okay.
So to take the 10 additional days, it's for this independent investigation.
And as additional staff come on, we'll potentially even have, the, what do you call them, the water, the staff we're gonna hire, you said it earlier,
Water commissioner.
commissioners, water commissioners.
Yep.
So I think there's always gonna be, I mean, I'd always assumed that there would be some expectation that the office would have to do some investigation case by case. Especially if we're trying to confirm or deny a particular issue.
I mean, I don't have a legal problem, it's just kind of a policy question.
You know,
So I have a question.
Um,
Go ahead.
I'm just, I didn't mean to cut you off. So, for what it's worth, under sub 4, like every water use complaint that I've managed with the DRC involves something. Like, or, and, you know, it doesn't mean that's what Jeff do here, but that's typically it.
So I had a question. So I've not done this before, but I have done surface water types of investigations before. And so you have someone who's a neighbor complains, they're doing something, you want to go check it out, it's private property, they say, no, you can't come on to check it out. Would that be the kind of situation that would kick in additional support on an investigation to do property access or?
In a bit of, pretty wide sweeping abilities for the water engineer or the designee, that is in the investigation of, the water enforcement issue, I don't think there's anywhere we can't go. Now, that's a piece of paper that says that so far, but that kind of covers, you know, all jurisdictions, which is rare. And only was able to be done because you had federal, tribal, and state participation in the negotiated outcome.
Okay.
But, you know, obviously,
in your experience or in Roger's experience, you ever been denied access on a piece of private property?
I can answer yes, I have, and then we asserted access using the law enforcement.
So
One
that
time,
gets to a question I have is, so would the jurisdictional aspect of that issue then depend on the status of the land? Because if we go after law enforcement here, we've got the potential for several jurisdictional law enforcement entities.
it would to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, I think that's an option, too, that is available, in the ordinance, and, you know, I'm just saying this plainly, but it's not most likely what's gonna be the case, but plainly in the ordinance, so long as there's reasonable notice to that landowner, the engineer can enter on that land.
Yeah, but if they're denied access.
Right, but it's just about notice under the ordinance. So even if they deny it, if they provide the reasonable notice to that landowner under the ordinance, they can enter that land. I mean, is it the smart decision?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking if they're denied, I mean, literally, you can't come on this property. stay off, which I, now that you've raised it, I don't, it wouldn't surprise me that we end up in that situation. So then what?
That's where I think you have to seek law enforcement help.
Yeah, then the question is which?
I think it would depend on the land status, like you were saying. No, I am in agreement with you on that.
Yeah,
I encountered that several times in my career,
Same here.
and it can get complex in a hurry.
mhm.
And I was just curious if that's when you would have an independent investigation, meaning you now have to involve some type of law enforcement to help you get them. So,
Right. Well, I think it's important to talk about, even if we don't say anything more about it here. I think it's important to talk about, because I think it'll happen.
And well, and so one resolution that you can also do is to absent participation in the allowance to investigate the situation, you could just issue an order based on what you can do. And if that's a different circumstance, but so that this board has the ability to provide a legal, a fiscal incentive, whether you comply or just revoking a water right. There's a lot of other avenues other than trying to bargain on the property. You know, if somebody's non-participatory or, you know, posing some other kind of the blocking of official actions.
And on the state side, the water commissioners are designated law enforcement officers.
No, didn't know that one.
So can I ask a question about 5C?
Yeah, that'll get us on to the next page.
How do you tell first? Who decides who's an expert?
The engineer
Based on,
criteria for determining an expert.
so if I bring my next door neighbor to testify on my behalf, and he or she really doesn't have any expertise, then would the engineer say you don't testify, or let him testify and not really consider their testimony?
The engineer could let them testify, present testimony. Yeah, I mean, it would be whether they would designate them as an expert or not, most likely, no, it would be a lay witness at that point. But, you know, there's a lot of freedom in the evidence that the engineer designee can let come in. I mean, you understand this term, Ken, but hearsay is even allowed in this.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's not typically allowed, as evidence, so,
What if one party objected to the other? He's not an expert.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it could be put on the record, I would say.
Objection noted, move on. We're gonna make a decision based on the best information we have.
Yeah.
And then,
Interesting.
then it'll get appealed. Then it comes to you, us, and we decide. And then it goes to the court.
What about that testimony, if we could back up one to B? There is, says that the engineer that may, or may not set time limits on the plans. I just had to, I wanted to hear what the board thought about time limits in relation to presenting evidence and, evidence.
I think it's unless it's specified in the ordinance. You'll probably want to have some rough guidelines, but then case by case. Decide, because if you have one or two witnesses, they might have more time. If you have 100 witnesses and you're limited to, you want to limit your hearing to an hour, they're gonna have less time. Everybody knows that in advance, and then they can decide if they wanna mean, that would be my take on it, but that's just me. You've done hearings, you've probably done hearings.
I had it circled too, but then the more I thought about it, the more I thought. It just depends upon the situation.
Okay. So again, I don't have your background, but then we look at the word evidence. Who decides that someone's actually submitting evidence or someone just starts ranting? Right? Do you have a cutoff clause when somebody's just ranting? Can you cut them off, or do you have to just sit and listen to them? Because we have a few ranters in the valley, right? So,
Could be evidence.
but you have to just sit and listen to that.
Well, we did during negotiation sessions. Give people, and public hearings, public notice, public times, give people, oh, you got 2 minutes. And they can use their 2 minutes how they want. And sometimes it would be good information, and sometimes it was just ranting. Never know.
And having been in hearings or still in actually, sometimes it's good to let them rant.
Just let them go.
Let them go.
It's like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Let the pressure on.
Give me a day for it.
Okay. I was just wondering, we're looking at these definitions and evidence. How do you define evidence? Just curious. So,
That's true.
Parties.
Here.
That's where the parties to decide what they're gonna present. I mean, it might be a lay person coming in saying, I know this, I know that. Or they might bring in a hydrologist or a lawyer or an engineer or somebody to say, then they're gonna weigh it as probably stronger evidence.
that makes sense. I was just I'm thinking of you, Ethan, thinking of what you're gonna have to listen to. So,
Well, to kind of further,
for all of us, I guess.
you have two types of evidence. You have circumstantial and you have direct evidence. Direct is you hear it, you see it, you smell it. Circumstantial is, Rich is looking at something and I can't see what he's looking at, but I'm assuming it's a slap. Okay, that's it. And then it's further qualified by it possesses property value, so it just gotta be right.
Yeah.
I get, is that close to correct?
The only catch there in terms of time though, is that it says any hearing, logistics should be detailed and notice of complaint. So hard part there to me is you're trying to predetermine those time limits. When we don't know how many at that moment, don't know how many witnesses there will be, or how long the case will be. So it's kind of hard to, seems to me that'd be hard to predetermine that, but that's just the thought.
And is that ordinance language, or can we amend it at all and add like case by case, which you mentioned? Or is this all ordinance?
The last sentence, no, that was put in, so we can most certainly do case by case basis. The thing with that is, so a hearing does need to be set
Yeah,
by the ordinance, and so, like the hearing logistics, like time, location, date, manner in which the hearing will be held. So is it gonna be over Zoom? Is it gonna be here at the office?
So
That
they-
all needs to be said.
so they don't need to set the time limitations to the presentations at that time.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
well, I was thinking that it'd be nice, after the hearing is set, to require the parties to provide a list of who's gonna provide, information, testimony, whether they are considered to be an expert or not. And then, I'd like to just have a follow-up to where I can, require, each party to provide a proposed time allotment for their witnesses. Then I would go from there. So,
Trigger something, I mean, what if one comes in with a turn, so we want to depose the other side before the win? Does the engineer have that authority?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, what if one of the parties comes in with their attorney and they say, we want to depose the other party's witnesses before the win? That's something the engineer.
I think in this setting, no, because it's the evidence that's submitted on the complaint. And then the other evidence is what the engineer wants brought in. So it's not the parties,
The response.
right? It's the engineer bringing up in the other evidence if they so choose to do so.
Not really following. Oh. Just seems like a gap.
Have you run into that in a hearing situation?
No. But I think it happens. A lot. Especially, I know it happens in charts. The administrative hearings and solution.
Yeah. I mean, that's in the sort of legal realm, deposing someone has certain, carries a certain status and certain nature to it. Attorney, it means something for an attorney to say, I'm gonna depose somebody. I get your question, but I'm not sure how that, and why that would happen in a hearing situation.
They provided a list of witnesses, which is technically reasonable from the request. And this is someone that calls an expert. I don't know what this actually is going to say. So I'm going to prepare my case.
So
Getting things.
I think so.
You're treating
Yeah.
you're treating it more like a trial than a hearing.
yeah, I guess I get what you're saying, Ken. Because I've seen that happen and. But then I guess, are we setting the sideboards though and allowing it or not allowing it? You know, do we need to speak specific to it? Even, you know, because I could see somebody saying, I want to depose this hydrologist before we go to trial. I want to prepare, you know.
So in a trial setting though,
Or a
if
hearing.
well, no, in a trial setting, if there is a deposition requested, what role does the court play?
So the court does not do anything in terms of at the deposition. When the deposition is being taken, the court is not part of that. There's a reporter there who's jotting down and getting all of the transcripts and such. And the transcript is then submitted to the court because depositions are out of court testimony. So it is a sworn statement that parties can submit before the court as testimony from that witness.
But, you know, to narrow it down, my question was, if the matter came up, could the engineer say, sure?
Well, but reaching for, part of what I was asking is, if maybe the record gets submitted, but the court isn't gonna say whether they do or do not do the deposition, that's between the parties,
Yeah.
right?
That's a fact investigation piece. It's not part of the actual trial.
Of the, or wouldn't have to be part of the hearing, so it could be part of the parties. The parties could say, well, I want to depose your witness, and they could agree or not agree.
Yes,
And then if they do, though, so would it be helpful to have something that says, if parties depose witnesses, a transcript of that deposition must be provided to the hearing officer? And then it's up to them to do it or not do it, but if they do, you wouldn't want to have them do it and then not have that record.
I would agree. mean, what if I proposed Roger, it turned out to be brilliant, hydrologist country.
So is there an option in a court setting for them to do the deposition and then send it or not send it?
If they wanna use it as testimony, then yeah, it has to be submitted.
So they have an option. Oh,
But I mean, that's
okay,
the ways to take a deposition and.
so in either case, it's really between depositions are really then between the parties and Ethan shouldn't have to say yes or no, they just. The part, you know, if they raise it to him, they say, well, that's between you guys.
Right,
Okay,
I think, yeah, I don't think we should take the time to define that or give that avenue in this setting. I mean, I think if it comes up. You know, that'll be a discussion that you can have with legal counsel.
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, I think it's a good thought though, because this is. A kind of. You know,
No,
big process in this point.
and new.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I kind of like the idea, just saying you can't just propose. But that's where Roger, we just said it's not part of this process. And, you know, all the information is presented for the first time at the hearing.
Yeah, and that's, you know, kind of where I think this process is different from, let's say, the application review. Those hearings before the engineer, where that is a lot more like a small trial in a sense. This is, there's a complaint, what's on the complaint and what's asserted on the complaint is before the engineer, and it's the engineer's prerogative to then seek additional information if they so choose. But whatever is submitted on the complaint is what's in front of the engineer as evidence.
I don't think these timeframes will allow for deposition.
That's the other piece.
God.
Could I go back to B one last time? This is just editorial comment. Yeah, you have to say may or may not. Just say may.
I like that.
That's it. There you go.
And I just have a spelling thing for something like D. You and me are tag teaming them. It's if you go down to D, it should be, I think, commonly relied upon instead of reviewed upon.
Oh.
Well, E kind of gets to some of your stuff, Georgia. Evidence which is irrelevant, immaterial, unduly repetitious shall be excluded.
Yeah, but you still had to sit through
And it eats up time.
it.
No, but you have to think about what people's rights are and if you have to straight to have this hearing, so.
Sure.
You want to be heard. What role, if any, you know, your office play, what should your office play in the final decision? The writing of the final decision?
None in the writing. No, it would be more of just an advisory role. So if there were legal questions, or,
It's just finding the fact conclusions of law. So if there's a question about a conclusion of law, you can confer or
Yeah.
no? Okay.
yeah, so if there's an ordinance, if there's a section of the ordinance that he's trying to apply to this particular situation, yes, the interpretation of that section of the ordinance could be directed to legal counsel. But the actual drafting, writing of the decision would be on the engineer.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. So Haley had to, listen to me. Right. A little bit about, findings of fact and conclusions of law, in this circumstance, and also in relation to decisions about water right applications. And, I'm nervous about this language because I've seen it buckle the NRC processes, where there's pages and pages of findings of fact and conclusions of law, and I look at where we're at with our staffing level and our timelines, and there could quickly be an incongruency between at least following a pattern that I'm most familiar with, which is the one that followed for a lot of their decisions, and so I'm a little triggered by the findings of fact, conclusions of law statement, just because I don't want to find this getting deeply bogged down in that process.
Well, so that causes me to ask you a question then. Have you ever written a finding of fact conclusions of law document?
Yes, but the writing of that was largely a copying and pasting of other legal supporting background information from staff lawyers that, this office, we're not staffed quite like that.
Yeah, I'm not, with no assumption, no disrespect at all. Would you prefer some training?
Well, sure, training is good, but also I just would prefer to not go down the road to have, an extremely robust legal document that is akin to what you might see.
I mean, I'm absolutely no expert on it, but I think I've been around it enough to know that I think it becomes a summary. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but needs to be complete and as simple as possible, so they're doable. But that's what I was asking. Maybe there's a way we can work out some sort of examples and training, just to do a few, just to get a test.
I would never vote to affirm an engineer or anybody else's decision if I didn't have findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Oh, I agree, we need to have them. That's what I'm saying. We need to, it's just a question of, I mean, if we've got, and, some, I'll call it slight anxiety over it at this point, maybe we can alleviate that by providing some
And I think through
training,
practice,
some practice.
just do it a couple times. I don't find it too hard to do, because when I issue my decisions, they're findings of fact and conclusions of law. But I think our way, you don't have to cite all the facts. I only cite facts that are relevant to what the decision is. You may have 1,000 facts, but 10 of them cite 10.
Yeah.
Well, you probably don't have to cite case law and everything else, so.
Conclusions of law are really gonna be those tied to the ordinance, probably not case law.
I'll wait to see on that one, because I don't know, because we don't know what the law is.
Well, let's talk about that. So, I mean, if we're gonna go down, have a hearing, findings of fact, conclusions of law, what else, at least until and unless there are court cases out there that address our work, those conclusions of almost have to be tied to what we know about the ordinance.
help me on this, Haley, there's a standard in the 9th, 10th, 8th circuit, and I think the language is, does the decision link to the facts found to the decision made? And am I close on that? What's the word to illustrate? Let me rephrase it. Does the decision show the decision maker link the decision made to the facts that were found? And that's a standard for the 9th, 10th circuits, federal courts. I didn't say that correctly, but that's basically what it means.
Yeah, you're just talking about like the standard of review.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, did the engineer like properly, evaluate the facts? And make conclusions based on the facts?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, I get where you're going with that.
And I think that it should answer a lot of your concerns.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to look to the ordinance and determine the facts on the ground and look into the ordinance. It's another thing that goes beyond that. So on the the former of those two arrangements, I think it's actually pretty manageable.
Yeah, I mean,
On
what
the
the
latter, oh my God, we're looking at other water law case decisions to help guide decisions made here in addition to that's a different kind of an ask to me.
And that's where I think Haley will play a really important part. Because she will provide, here's the facts that we found, here's what I think we should do, are there any laws that guide me? Are they pertinent, should we apply them? And that's where I think you're gonna play a huge role.
Yeah, so I think that's where it could relieve some stress, is any of those kind of, and what those are typically called in this situation is persuasive authority. So it wouldn't necessarily be binding on the office or the board because it's not part of the board's authority or jurisdiction. What is the content in the ordinance at this point? Like Clayton said, until we have case law out there that deals with our decisions, we don't have really binding authority except for the document, the originating documents. And so any other case law out there, from whether it be from the water board, whether it be a DNRC hearing examiner's decision on something similar to this, that would be persuasive, but it could be a question that you could ask legal counsel.
District court or former or historical documents from counties or courts.
Well, I mean, we have statements of claim that need to be administered on this reservation, and case work on historic statements of claim is extensive. I'm just giving you a very concrete example of something that I think pushes that envelope. Okay, and we still recognize the Montana Water Court's jurisdiction here as well, which is those are a lot of what they do is based and predicated on casework. And also, just sorry to bring it up, but I am still in a little bit of a gray spot as to what kind of level of support I would be able to expect Haley on something specific, like the facts and the details of the decision of the case that keeps her in good standing with being able to serve as your counsel in an appeal situation or a decision that I have made. And so those are, those are things that, I think merit a little bit of additional discussion so that I can find out. I need to have a few more of those sideboards so that, on the one hand, like about the ordinance and I can see a lot of ways to make a really easy type of decision. Some other ones are a little bit more complicated when you throw some of those complexities in there, and then how much can legal counsel actually help beyond the specifics of the decision and tailoring that, making sure that we have the correct
How do you, Haley, how do you define your role in that?
Sure, so I guess to just expand on that, I mean, again, clear cut line. Legal counsel cannot draft the engineer's decision, period. If there's any questions regarding how legal standards should be applied to those specific facts, that's acceptable. And so if you had something about the ordinance section, or if you had something with Montana Water Court, you found a case that might apply to these facts, the interpretation of that case, we can relay that information to you, but we can't tell you how to draft that in your decision.
I would assume roughly that the engineer's office wouldn't be necessarily have to be in a position to do the independent legal research to find case law, but that the parties would initiate that, and that the engineer could examine that and determine its applicability.
Yeah, the parties might, I would highly doubt that the parties would bring, at this point, some case law in front of the engineer, mainly because it's more of a fact
Right,
analysis. But yes, I mean, if Ethan said, is there any case law that supports what I'm trying to do here? Yeah, we could do that research for him.
But I think any party represented by attorney, they're gonna have their attorney find what's out there, if there's anything. It's kind of the burden's on them.
and that's what I'm thinking, but I think what you just said helps.
Okay, well, it's a burden on them to find the information, that's fine, but then also we can then wonder with each other whether that information should be used to make a decision.
Yeah, they would be responsible for running the facts and providing applicable law, there's a.
And so when I get that information, I can't give you that information and have you review it for me
You can,
and tell me your. Well, I'm just, the difference between drafting a decision and helping me draft a decision is something I'm trying to tease out here, okay?
And it's the interpretation.
well, yes, it's the interpretation and the application of the legal side of it to those facts. So yes, we could review what's in front of you, but if I'm sitting there, you know, and we're collaboratively drafting something, that's not where we're going here. That's the hard line. Anytime I'm trying to say, you know, does this sound okay? Does this sound okay? I can say, you know, here's the standard in law, and this is how it's applied, but I can't give you direct language to draft.
Are you saying that's something you need though?
Sometimes I would think that would be something I would do,
I would expect it.
you know.
And so then, if I'm tracking this, would Ethan then need to retain a different attorney for drafting these, you know, decisions?
No, he's gonna have to draft it.
I think that's a concern with that, because if you have the office, which is the board, having its own attorney, and then the board having their own attorney, which includes the office, that's a bad message there. But if you look at hearing examiners within like the DNRC, some of them are not attorneys.
Right.
They're technical experts that can draft these things, and so the training piece is maybe a good option.
I don't know if that's something your office could provide, or you could
Could look
Point-
into some options.
point to what some options there. I just think that I would be.
So we hire a hearings exam.
That too.
So, you know, you don't have to call the water, but. You know, that would be another option.
Well, we should look at those options. And, but I wouldn't shy away from, you know, you're likely gonna be in this position unless we do something like that, so.
Sure.
That'll be the fun part.
Well, I have a real controversial question. You ever heard of the Oxford comma?
Yes.
Huh? I think findings of fact concludes a law could use an Oxford comma.
Yep.
After the-
Before and.
Yeah.
Yep.
Technically, it's not required. I can't change it else. Yeah.
Okay, if we can agree to that, can we also, still one other formatting issue, when we do an acronym for the first time, and,
Roll it out.
acronym is in the parens after the full phrase. Some people do parens and then they do quotation marks. I'd rather just do parens, but we have a mix.
I use quotation marks, but it's not necessary.
We friends works for Rich.
Okay. I would like to, I would want to try to keep things a little consistent.
I think as long as it's consistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are we on 7? We are,
I think we have been.
yeah. Sorry.
That's what I thought.
So on 7C. So delivery of water, does that include the type of use of the amount of water? So if someone comes in and says, well, let's change the use of this water. Now, so I know it says not limited to, change it out. Is that something we should address more? Than just delivery of water?
We could, so this is directly from the content too, just for reference.
There's that highlighted, sorry.
I did cite it at the very end under
Oh, I see.
4.
Yep.
But, yeah,
So all 1 through 4 are all directly cited.
Oh, they are?
yes, they
Oh,
are.
okay, never mind.
Yeah, the citation is that 31103 sub 3. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't.
Well, I think it's stay consistent. I think the are not limited to takes care of it.
And so 8 is the same thing,
Yeah.
because it looks like you cited the ordinance. I mean, it's all highlighted, but at the end on C, is that correct? Okay.
Is emergency enforcement defined?
What's that?
It's like it's in the ordinance.
Yeah, it's true.
We talk about the actual term.
Yeah, like what is it? Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, emergency is defined.
A situation that demands unusual or immediate action to prevent imminent injury to life, property, or the environment. Okay.
So if it is a defined term though, we should capitalize emergency in that section. So in 8.
So I just thought of something, and John pointed out that one meeting, unlike regular administrative procedures, this one does have a procedure where parties can file stuff with the board, certain circumstances after. Never mind. I just thought it through.
I'm kidding. You know, that procedure happens after.
That's what the flow charts are gonna be so great for.
Thank you.
Are we on 10 then?
Yeah, and then 9A has got that, the access issue that we talked about earlier, just in case somebody wanted to see it. The way it's actually written out.
And I think I would just make a note from the previous conversation we had about the informal complaints that are brought in on like illegal use or suspected use. I think if you did want to put something in this process to deal with that, it could just be one subsection, just right above 9. That just is informal complaints before the engineer or before the office. And it would describe, you know, that exact scenario, and then if we want to require them to have documentation, you know, take documentation of it, and that's it. And then it goes right into the additional enforcement powers of the engineer, which is to investigate, may investigate, it's not a requirement. So that's the other thing with the fee that I think we should consider too, is that it's a requirement of the engineer to go out and investigate that. But there's an option to do it.
But the fee is required.
It's not. We had just talked about it, with, if somebody just came in and said, you know, there's somebody using water legally out there, are we gonna require a fee for that?
But we may not investigate it. If they're just gonna come out and say something. And to me, if they're serious, they put it down in the complaint form.
So if we insert something there, if you recommend something and we insert it and then say something about a fee. Set a fee and then leave the fee optional. Instead of mandatory. In that case, I'm just,
Yeah, well, where I was at, what I thought that you wanted me to do is that we were gonna come back to you with a recommendation for how to handle the informal complaints. I was intended to make that an optional fee and have, you know, some optionality on how our office would document it based on whether or not somebody's really, a lot of people feel uneasy about becoming directly
involved.
So I was gonna try to do my best to dance around that in a fashion that left it up to our, you know, basically my judgment on how much documentation I thought made sense. The informal complaint.
And then, if you guys wanna make a recommendation, or that'd be good.
Right, and again, if you had some other sideboards, I'm happy to do that, but we're trying to give you something good.
Do you wanna set a fee or a potential fee?
So I guess when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about an instance, 2 different ones. One, this was working in water quality, but I had a homeowner who was basically upset with the neighbor and just wanted to bad them. Just anything, they made something up. And I had to drive across the reservation, spend a whole bunch of time over nothing. You want to discourage that, right? And that's where having a filing fee might discourage some of that, but I've also had the instances where we had people report legitimate major breaches. And you don't want to discourage
You don't wanna ignore that.
that. Yeah, we had a guy dumping dead cattle in the middle of one of the reservation streams, and it was affecting people's drinking water downstream. That was definitely something we needed to investigate. So I don't know what the right answer is on this. I just don't want to set up a process that would invite needless or frivolous kinds of complaints.
But also, I don't, I mean, there'll be some, right? And, I'll do my best to come up with an option to head out.
Could you set it up as a deposit? Things,
Put it with trust account.
if it turns out to be, valid, we return part of it. If it's not valid, we keep it all. I don't. It's just, because that just follows what you're saying.
Yeah, it's something to really consider, isn't it, Clayton? Because it could be something that ends up taking a lot of staff time.
Yeah.
I already sort of had on the formal complaints.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what people want.
Yeah.
Water administration.
Let's see, what was it?
Yes, sir.
We're pretty much a complaint driven process here. And if we discourage, I know the county planning offices does not charge fees for funds. And they do the same sort of thing, and they spend a lot of time. If you're chilling people from making a complaint by charging a fee, I think. Trying to get in the way of the process.
Now, and I hear you for sure on that. I have that same concern. The question that I do have for you is, we do have this draft form that has, that's really two water users. Regarding actions or interactions between two water users, it does have this $55 fee, and so this would be the time to direct us on. If 55 is not a huge amount of money for our office, by any means, these complaints will take more time than we'll ever see, but yeah, the frivolous issue, which is a legitimate issue. You have the not wanting to discourage people from participating in the complaint-driven process, which is also a legitimate issue. I get to go back and forth for anybody with that.
How did you wind up at $55? That seems like kind of an odd amount, but.
But let's make it so it doesn't, if somebody really wants to complain, they can afford it.
It's true. I mean, Lake County, last census, family of 4, average income is under 40,000. We're not a very affluent county. If we take out Polson, it's worse. 55. Seems like a pretty fair number. At least that just makes me.
Maybe we think about this a little differently in that, there are gonna be some that come in and people wanna file for a complaint, that's just clear. If they come in and they just wanna complain and we sort of characterize it under the guise of a informal complaint. And we say, well, an informal complaint will result in us generating this much work. We're not gonna do more, but if we determine through that it really should be a formal complaint, then in order for you to continue, you're required to file it as a formal complaint, and then we go forward. Kind of tier it so that. Because somebody might file what they think is an informal complaint, and you do a little research and find out it's really a big deal. And if it's not, then you just handle it.
I don't know if we should spell that out. I think again, we really have to think of these separately, right? So the water use complaint that we have this form for and filing fee is a formal complaint between water users
Yeah, okay.
talking about waste of water. So that is it, like that's a specific scenario. So if somebody came in with an informal complaint saying this exact thing, like, my neighbor, both of us have been using water in this valley, blah, blah, blah. Then the engineer could recommend, that sounds like it's a formal complaint. Let me give you this form to fill out, right? And so there's the advice piece to go that route, depending on what was brought before the engineer. Now, if the other side of it is if they brought in an informal complaint, for example, there might be a well being put in, down here, and I'm pretty sure they don't have water rights, on that land. That would be the informal complaint of potential illegal use, which the engineer has enforcement abilities to then go investigate. With the filing fee piece on that side, I don't think we should, because let's say the engineer investigates, finds that, oh, okay, there is some stuff going on. The engineer can motion to the board to put a fine on that individual. And so there is that tail, like the back end piece of it, to then go after them financially too.
Good clarification, thank you.
So what do you do if someone calls the office? So down the road doing this, that, water, and say, well, there's gonna be a $55 fee, and it says, never mind, hangs up. What do you do at that point?
Well, I wouldn't be at that point right off, like in that scenario, which happens here in this office a lot, all right? Start, okay, what are we talking about? And we usually look it up on a map, and then, how do you guys get your water? Is this off of a private ditch, or is this the irrigation project? And so right there, we can find out it's the irrigation project issue. I'm out. I give you a phone number in St. Ignatius, and that's an avenue. That's like a little pamphlet we're talking about a little bit. Where so we do triage like that. Is it a groundwater well? Is it what? Do we have a filing in the office? We do generally do a bunch of that right off the bat. And where it gets just in our these are real experience. Where it gets a little harder is there's people who have complaints about culverts and whether or not somebody's blocking a culvert and drying them up, or whether or not that's culvert feature is actually a date feature. And we try to parse that out and help to explain how the water use works and whether there's a water right. So all that kind of conversation happens before we get to go like, okay, now it starts to sound to me like you actually do have a real conflict with your neighbor. And you're
not answering my question.
I'm sorry.
My question is, what if you get a call? And someone else kind of like finds out a fee and says, never mind, hangs up. I no longer have a complaint.
Yeah.
Do you take action or not?
And on what the complaint was, the magnitude.
We don't get that complaint because they hung up, there's no complaint, so I can't see that there is. But your point is, then what if there is a problem out there? Yeah, well, we're probably gonna run into that, because there are probably gonna be problems out there people don't report.
Yeah, neighbor's a bully. They don't want to commit to filing the complaint. Right?
Well, that's the answer. There's no complaint, there's no action.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, unless you have something else.
No, that's the answer.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, at present, we don't have some sort of an active program to go out looking for issues beyond, in fact, even the ones that we know about. We're not out actively
policing.
policing, and if that's the direction, then I have to tell me pretty.
No, you're.
No, again,
No, hire more staff and we get the water. What do you call them? Commissioners. Eventually, commissioners will be a little more active, but because they're supposed to be more enforcement.
So the informal comes before 9. But now I have a question on 9. Dealing with the phrase in the first sentence, a reasonable notice of the item. If the complaint, the office receives a complaint, the office has 3 days to notice the complainant And then after that, 15 to 25 days for that hearing. What is reasonable notice of because the clock starts ticking, right, when that complaint comes in? How much, I know we don't like lists,
Well,
but what is reasonable notice when you've got a clock ticking down? When you need to enter the land to do an investigation. So you notice them that there's a complaint. You get more evidence, you get more information, you realize you're gonna have to get on that property. But maybe you're several days into this already. How much notice do you have to give the owner before you get off there, if it's not an emergency?
Yeah, I mean, there's no defined term of what that is, but to clarify that language, so this is directly from the ordinance again.
Right.
And so this whole section of additional enforcement powers is separate from the complaint process. It's just additional powers that the engineer has that could be used in a complaint process, but the way it's written in the ordinance, it's a separate. It's a separate consideration, so the reasonable notice in this section is separate from the notice that's required of the complaint.
It doesn't one necessarily follow.
Yes.
Okay.
and the other answer to your question is, we'll be the ones that decide whether or not the engineer acted reasonably.
Once somebody complains that he wasn't reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Kids are mad at each other and we gotta decide what's right.
You gotta be mom and dad.
With that, Chairman, would you be taking a 5-minute break?
Why not?
Pardon?
Why not?
Why not?
5-minute break. Let's do it. I mean, we're only scheduled till 4, but let's take a break and then we will need to extend a little longer. We can. So, all right. Take 5. Thank you.
So we're on the last page of this things of the process.
Yeah, well, we are on the last bit, so I don't know if we're short of the changes and the recommendations you and Ethan are gonna make, I think. I don't, as soon as they're done, we'll be about ready to approve this then, right?
Yes, and so I think a conversation we should have here because of this being essentially like the first
Oh,
chunk of the WPMP
right,
that we would be
so we'll
approving.
go to public comment.
Yes, we would approve it for publishing for us to comment, yes,
So the next time we see it, we should be approving it for that purpose.
yes.
Okay. All right,
So we couldn't approve it today, is what you're saying?
Not necessarily, I think there just might be too many edits.
well, I think
guess.
the edits and the recommendations, because we gotta get a recommendation on that informal complaint
Yes,
step.
But that was gonna be independent, wasn't it? That's like a,
Well, we did, she just mentioned and recommended that we could plug it in just before 9 here, just the one paragraph deal, so if you want to keep it separate, we could, but. I mean, if you see value in considering that, we could sure consider that,
I think it fits within the document.
all right? Okay, so we'll see a next step draft, the next draft should be. We should be at the point we're gonna approve it for public review, right? Okay, public comment. All right. And we do have that process in place.
We do.
All right. Okay, I guess we're on to. Are we done at 9?
Nothing we can do.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I don't know, Ken might have something.
No.
Number 10,
Can't change 9, Ken.
all right. Are we putting these on the website?
Yes,
Final decisions?
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the final decision is essentially what would be appealed to the board. So yes, it does need to be put on the website.
so where that cursor is at right now, on number 10. Did that read administrative record and kept? With the office of the engineer?
Oh, yeah. Without a comma?
Yeah, get rid of the con.
What kind of comma did you say that was before? I have no idea what
I
that is.
had never
No,
heard
there's a
any-
comma, but
That's
I,
a huge debate. Whether you have X, Y, and Z, do you have
oh,
comma before the end?
Yeah,
oh. Well, I say we don't need it in this case,
so right where your cursor is,
right, well above, right?
I guess not your cursor, but that bar.
Up by administrative.
Shall be entered in the administrative
So-
record
Yeah, where
and
the,
kept. No comma and,
You know.
And
and. Yeah,
and is kept the right word, filed,
and
kept, that seems a little,
retained.
Retained, housed.
How about putting retained instead of kept?
you change with the by.
Ethan, did you want to talk about the comment that you had me in there?
Oh, yeah. The administrative record isn't exactly defined anywhere. And, is that what we're talking about?
I mean, I think you had communicated wanting to put some sort of definition on it.
Well, it is written here like it's, other, and maybe if it doesn't need to be defined, I can be all right with that, but where it says the administrative record. It's gotta feel like the CFR or something,
What do we just take out administrative?
I prefer leaving it in because Chairman works.
Then define it. What's it mean?
It means anything the decision maker relied on, should rely on, and could have relied on. In making his or her decision.
So the reason why that term is in there is because it comes over in the context of an appeal. So if the final decision of the engineer were to be appealed to the board, they also need to then submit the administrative record before the board as well.
Should that be defined in the appeal process then?
I don't think so at all. I mean, it has the final decision, it's the complaint form in this case. It's the transcript from the hearing that's electronically recorded. And that, I mean, that is laid out. Not to that extreme, but it's laid out in the appeals documents.
Should that be the definition of it here then?
I don't think we should define it,
Oh, okay.
because it could include other things besides what I just mentioned. And I don't wanna limit that.
Oh, okay. I think that's what we're asking, to define it. I don't know.
I don't think it should be, but I put that comment in there because Ethan had a question about it.
Oh,
See what you did? I did. You did it.
Oh, no.
All right, you got the little power switch on there. That's the little button up. Just tell me when to take a break, I'll do it. Let's see here.
All right.
That, did.
Little eyes on.
little eyes aren't on.
There's nobody watching anyway.
It's better to kill your broadcast if there's nobody on the other end.
Except it's being recorded and it creates our minutes.
Yes.
You should come up with a really great story before we go back on though.
Thank goodness, yeah.
All was turned off because you just make something up.
Here, just came through the office, we knocked all the stuff over.
There you
We had a complaint.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Are we on?
Yeah.
Sorry, whoever is there, if you're there, we, the lights went out in Georgia here, so they turn them back on. We were dealing with complaints. Anyway, we're almost there, so 11, 12, 13, so 12 and 13, we can't touch either. And I think on the issue of the administrative record, so you had a question.
I think it's resolved, so it's a term of art. And it means everything that went into the decision making that could have been used or was used or should have been used. I don't know if I'll fully be able to document all the should have beens, but
Shoulda, yeah.
Your poems, well,
Yeah. So. If it's okay, then it's a little nebulous to me, and if that is how, the administrative record is, it's not designated to be something, more scripted or defined, I'm fine with that. Thank you for helping me along.
I get the concept of administrative record. I do not get the concept of should have. Should have been used.
oh, that's when someone's contesting your decision, you said, this is all the evidence you didn't look at.
But that wouldn't be part of the record.
No. We're saying the record's deficient.
Oh. Okay. Clear?
Yeah, we're good to go. I'm gonna handle that.
All right.
And after the meeting's over, I'll tell you that I have a really great story about should have been used.
Hmm.
It's not really pertinent to the record here.
All right. Effective final decision, number 11.
I really lost this.
I got a couple of questions.
Yep.
On this. Right, so right where it's flashing right now, end claims there, should that be that? THAT, yeah, that were raised, and then, or might have been raised. That seems pretty arbitrary, I don't.
Well, to me, that's in the category of should have been.
Yeah.
I don't get it, but
Yeah, so I mean, what that's getting at, there's two, kind of legal claims that you can bring with regard to that. There's res judicata, which is getting to that. It just means that, you were given this opportunity to raise it at this time. And then if they appeal it, and that's when they're finally raising it, you had that chance. It might have been raised at that time, but you didn't.
That could.
Yeah, I mean, could is fine too. But all the issues and claims that were raised is one piece, and then could have been raised is the other piece of those actual arguments.
Something.
Mhm.
So to appeal a decision, it has to be the final decision. But this is the last step.
Right.
And once you have that agency finality, then you can go to the next step. So that's what this paragraph does basically. So this is it. I don't care what you could have or should have, this is it.
Mhm.
Okay. I like might better.
All right, Mike.
so 13. Highlighted, I guess, are out of the ordinance. 13 out of the ordinance. Out of the ordinance as well.
Yes, sorry, it is. It's 31103 sub 4. Decision of the engineer designee shall not be stayed during the pendency of the appeal unless the court expressly orders such a stay.
It's just not. The site's not on here.
Right.
Should we add the citation to it?
If we want to have a certain type of format, so I was adding the citations in, that's kind of how I did the appeals documents too, with the citations like that, and then we went through and highlighted some things too, so if we want to be consistent, we can just do citations to direct language. Would be ordinance, comma, section, symbol 3-1-103. And then sub 4. Nope, so
No,
it
just
will be
print.
friends and then a 4. And then put the parentheses next to the 3, so no space. Here you go.
Do we put a period? Like that? Okay.
All right. All right, next time we see this, we'll see a updated draft with the recommendation on that, one section for informal complaints, and, hopefully it'll be in a condition we can approve for public comment. And then public comment, get it back, review it, finalize it, take action. Once we take action on it at that time, we can take action on that in the form, and then they'll be ready to go, right? Okay.
If, Mr. Chairman, board members, if we could just revisit the filing fee on the water use complaint form one more time. So I can figure out what that should look like.
Right.
Whether or not the 55, you might have told me when I made the little bits, but we currently have a filing fee of 55.
What are other fees range?
The other fees are going to change a lot. This is one of the lowest. I can have one other lower fee, which is for
65 for the extension.
okay, even 65 for an extension. This is in fact the lowest form filing fee that we have.
What's an application fee?
Well, it depends on what you apply for. Our regular individual domestic allowance fees here during the next year will increase from 125 to 250. Give you an idea of the fee that we see the most. The deadline extension is 65 if you file before you miss your extension, and 115 if you file after you miss. We have an ownership update of an active water right application, which is different than an ownership update of a water right. But sometimes when people are partway through applying for a water right, they sell property. And we will convert an application over to a new applicant for how much is that? The application fee, yeah, it is. Yeah, we think that's 50. Let me go back a little.
The fees range from 50 to 100 and
To soon to be 250.
So the DNC have a fee? Same type of form, do they have this type of form?
For this type of complaint. I'm not sure.
I don't believe they have a fee.
Okay.
Not sure, but I don't.
I'm on the internet here real quick to see if I can.
Well, if they don't have a fee, then that resolves the informal complaints fee question.
so. Under this system or under the state system, you get, let's say you file the complaint. And if it's resolved, then it ends. If it's not resolved, it goes to a hearing. Just thinking more about, again, in steps. They could file $55 for a complaint, but if it goes to a hearing, maybe it's more. I don't know how to do that, but goes to a hearing, it'd be a lot more work.
Yeah. So, okay, I keep asking these questions you guys probably all know the answer to, but let's say you bring a complaint. Your neighbor's taking the water. It goes into a hearing. The finding is that, yes, your neighbor was taking your water. Would one of the things that the office could order is for the person who's taking your water to pay your filing fee? You had to complain
Sure.
against them.
We did write it that way
Is
first,
that how it is?
and you guys,
And we said no.
you did not like that section. You know, where it was set up so that the water engineer could reassign the fee payment to the offending water user if the decision was made that they were really offending the water user, that was determined to be too complicated. At a juncture doesn't mean we won't revisit it.
Well, I assume if there is found to be an offending water user, that there'll be consequences of one type or another anyway.
That is something that we did not write into the complaint process yet.
Well, there are conditions included in the final decision. Yeah, we do have those
It,
right in there.
it has that authority to put conditions. That's what I'm saying. Those would be the consequences.
Right, and then there's also the ability of the engineer to motion to the board
A fine.
to put in like the
fine.
fines or revoke the permit. So there is all of that other enforcement ability too.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Did you find out? Were you guys looking to see if the DNRC had a fee for their complaint?
So they have a more basic water use complaint form, and there's no fee
I
on
didn't think
this. On this one, which is making me think maybe we would have two complaint forms, one for this that's specific to this section where you're getting a hearing, and one that was what I think we've been calling the informal complaint. And that the informal complaint would have no fee, and that this other one with the hearing might have, I'm throwing ideas out here.
Yeah, formal and informal. So we're good. You're gonna recommend the language for the informal piece in here, but the rest of this we're assuming is the formal complaint process is defined by the ordinance.
See, I could argue that being that we're required to be consistent with DNRC fees, that we really don't have the authority to have a fee.
I think we're required to be consistent with some fees, not all there. I think they're specified in there. Unless it's specified, I mean, those are the ones that are specified that we have to follow.
Well, and where that argument falls apart is DNRC's complaint process doesn't go into anything like this.
Okay.
So if this were an objection, then there's a fee for the objection filing, and then you have a hearing,
So we should look at the DNRC form for an objection.
and that's only $25, I think, or maybe it's gone up, I don't.
I think we should be consistent with DNRC, charge 25.
I don't know, because that's a completely different process. So the water use.
Well,
What the
it's,
objection is though.
yeah, it's analogous, I should say, in that, we'll get to that ourselves. We haven't got to those type of permits yet. So, I guess my case is that I think we should have a very simple informal application that has no fee to it. And this one, $55 to me is cheap. So, for all the work that's involved with this thing. I mean, the compact created quite a morass with this thing. So,
I can take a look at some of the local district court fees, because a water user complaint it comes before the district court. In terms of enforcement,
Sure.
just at state-based enforcement. So I think it would probably be more akin to like a district court complaint fee.
yeah, that's true.
Okay, so that's all.
That'd be good. Thank you. And then I think in any case, that doesn't drive at, I think what Georgia was trying to get at is you got the person filing complaint, paying the money, and the person who's being complained against not having to pay anything. Well, the issue is if there's a problem, then there'll be consequences at the end. All right, we can look at those. Maybe recommend.
Okay. We'll drum something else up for you. We'll leave this one at 55.
Well, she's gonna take a look at what the
District court.
district courts,
Okay.
just as a comparison. District court, I mean, offer as this, water complaints go to the district court, so what's a district court filing fee?
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
What is it?
See what that is. All right, wrap up for continue water policy procedures working session. So let's start on that and go for another footnote. We got plenty of food.
Yeah.
This could last a while.
Chili though.
I take it that,
Oh, well, I'll bring it back in. I wasn't trying to cut anybody off. I was just trying to get it colder.
I take it that time does not allow, so we're not continuing that. Any public comments? Anybody online? Any comments? Okay, no public comments for the record. Next steps. All right. So I assume we're not gonna meet till sometime in January now.
Yes.
You're gonna look at a date now, or?
It's a good valid assumption.
We're gonna meet till next year.
Next year, wow.
I don't know if you wanna,
Winter solstice.
Mhm.
is that today? Yeah.
So. The school starts back for me on the 8th. And in the winter quarter, I have Tuesdays where I don't teach on campus. And Thursdays I can be available in the afternoon, if that's helpful, if we're trying to stick with the Thursday like we were before.
That works for me. 11th through 10th.
Yeah, I teach till about noon Thursday, and then I'm available in the afternoon, or could be.
So
Gotta bring some sushi.
I could have it.
try to keep what is it, Thursday afternoon meeting, so shoot for 1 o'clock on the 11th. I see one head nod.
Yes.
Two head nod.
Yeah, I should be back by then.
And we might actually have an appointment by then too, right? I mean,
I'm hoping.
who knows?
Yeah.
If not, you'll be back, otherwise we'll have a new person.
You're hoping.
I'll be coming back from Frisco, Texas.
Georgia,
I
is we
mean,
put it at 1, or you fine, or you wanna go later? Or not do it that day?
It's the zoology lab, so I have to do a little bit of lab cleanup.
1:30,
Yeah, that gives me time without having to scream down the highway, so.
or we go to 2,
Well,
And you got a passing lane, so.
2 for 1:30.
I
1:30,
drive like a grandma, right? I drive like a
30.
total grandma.
1:30,
1:30.
so shoot for 1:30 on the 11th. That'll be our next meeting.
1:30 until when?
4:30,
Sure.
That's problematic for me. Supervisor's like, I might have to leave there.
okay, yeah, we'll just schedule it and see what happens.
Well, I guess we're kind of.
It was 1/11/24.
As
First time I
we,
wrote that.
Yeah.
it would be helpful for our office if we could set up like a standard meeting schedule.
Or our standard meeting schedule was Thursdays, right?
Well, we
Kinda went away.
we had a
Yeah.
regular second Thursday of every month. I think this board's business requires a minimum of 2 meetings a month. And it will definitely help us out to try to meet schedules. If we've got a good idea, we can either do the second and the third Thursday of each month, or the second and the fourth Thursday of each month.
Okay, or comments?
Is there another day of the week that works for you teacher people?
Yeah, I don't teach at all on Tuesdays
Too?
in the winter quarter, so those are free.
Is Tuesday more free than Thursday was?
Tuesday's more free than Thursdays, yeah. It's wide open.
We do shoot for the 9th and the 16th.
Does that do Tuesdays
Do
work
that.
for you?
That works for me.
9th and 16th,
Mhm.
Rich?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well,
I mean,
Well, what's the 9th of Tuesday? Oh, I'll be back.
okay, what's up?
let's talk, the 9th puts us in a pretty, in a pinch with trying to get what other meeting materials would we need to have ready by the 9th. So, because to meet, meeting, posting deadline for the 9th, that means everything's got to get posted on the 3rd. That doesn't give us a whole lot of,
Yeah.
not trying to be problematic, but
People's
You know,
schedule, yeah.
what you want to have, prepared.
Well, the 11th was good. Should we stick with that and then just pick another day?
The 11th and the 16th.
We'll go 16th, though. That's gonna be crunch time for your notice too, right?
We could do that a little easier. The issue, in particular with the 9th is that a lot of, people can be,
On leave.
I'm certainly gonna be on leave.
Yeah.
So, I believe we've got office coverage for the week of the 25th minus, of course, the 25th itself.
Take a day, take a day.
Well, I like what you just did.
Okay.
Yeah.
11th
Yeah.
and 16th.
Yeah,
All right.
so and then we could go to, if Tuesdays are the days, I can convert to Tuesdays, forward going with the understanding we just have to get those meeting
All right,
notices.
11th at 1:30, 16th, can we do one? Okay, 1 o'clock.
1 for 5 or 1 for
4. 4.
10?
All right, let's shoot for that. Let's see what happens. Okay.
So, and, priority items that we have ahead of us would be, additional work on the complaint forms, additional work on the WPMP, additional work on the Office of the Engineer personnel policies. I'll have information for you before that time on the budget.
Okay. Where are we at? Remind us where we're at on job advertisements.
I need to advertise them.
Mr. Chairman, I gotta go.
All right, sorry.
See you, Ken.
Travel safe.
Don't forget.
I'm not sure how fruitful it'll be to advertise over the holiday weekend, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of people are searching the web.
yeah.
I'd get them out.
Get them out. Are we wanting to include insurance on the next agenda or what?
Yeah, well, we're working on it. We're trying to set up a meeting. Ken, I'll be in touch with you.
So just let them know if they need to add that to the agenda.
Yeah, I will.
All right. So any last comments, Georgia?
Nope.
Ken? Nope. Roger?
No.
Rich?
No, I just think it'd be prudent to try to get that health insurance on the agenda
Yeah.
next
Yep.
board meeting.
Well, I think we'll see what they come up with.
We recognize
Push
it.
Adele if you have to.
That's,
Can I make a comment?
yes,
For the next agenda, we would also need to consider the approval of the appeals documents. Public comment ends January 2nd. So those would be available for approval by the board at that next meeting.
okay.
That's your,
Travel safe, Ken.
yeah, like you. Okay.
Okay.
All right, with that, motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Motion by Georgia.
Second.
Roger, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Stalled out.
Thank you all. We're hanging in there. Thanks for the food.